19 minutes.
I would move to approve. Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second, and so all in favor? Aye? Aye. Those are approved. Number 2, Human Resources Report for June.
You have the Human Resources Report before you. It's really rather standard. There's nothing terribly outstanding for me to draw your attention to, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Seeing no questions, well, that was only for discussion only. Number 3, discussion on City of Wausau longevity plan.
So this is an item we've been talking about for a while. So what I did is I put together a little bit history on the city's previous longevity programs. So historically, the city offered longevity for its union represented employees, but after Act 10, one of the unions that represented a number of employees essentially disbanded. They didn't choose to recertify, and so at that time, a bulk of employees became non-represented. But what I did is I got you the information for the 3 unions that we do still have in their negotiated longevity pay. Police and fire get a percentage, and Metro receives a flat rate. The Metro ride longevity is actually very, very similar. It might even be identical to what our longevity was before it went away. We also, in 2016, the city of Wausau surveyed other municipalities about their longevity programs. And at that time, we found out that the bulk of municipalities did the same thing that Wausau did, was it went away right around 2011, 2012, and they built them into their payroll systems. And so 6 municipalities kept longevity and 31 municipalities got rid of their longevity. I reached out to the 6 municipalities that back in 2016 still had longevity to make sure they still had it, and they all did. I also asked them if they would share with me how they were currently paying longevity, and I compared our programs to theirs, and we were more generous than almost all of the cities that had programs that we were able to compare to. Some of them use a completely different system, and it's like comparing apples to oranges. So 5 of the 6 use a flat rate, and our Metro Ride longevity program was more generous than all but 1 municipality. So that was good news. We have agendized this as a discussion item, because at this point I think we need feedback from the department, needs feedback from the committee about how we're imagining that this longevity program would look like. And that will, of course, have an impact on the fiscal impact and how I would be able to write the program. But some of the things that I think we should consider today is who do we want to be eligible for longevity? Previously, the program was limited to union employees, so management and exempt professionals were excluded. If we do that same thing, so if we use the same structure for our new longevity program, that could potentially exacerbate some feelings of pay compression between management and non-management, so we'd want to keep that in mind. Also, is our intention with the longevity program to alleviate the effect of redlining? If that's the case, then we can write the program specifically so that it kicks in once an individual is redlined. If that's not our intention, then we'd want a different type of policy put in place. And then the third question would be, if we are looking to bring back longevity pay, would that be something that we'd want to seek a budget modification for, or would we seek it in the 2020 budget? So those are kind of the topics that came to mind about answers that I would need from the committee before we could proceed.
I have talked to Tony for a while about longevity because this is my second term on HR, and I have received complaints from people that are redlined, and it makes sense. I mean, redline people aren't even getting cost of living raises. So in looking at this, my kind of idea was for the redline people. That's just what I was thinking. I didn't know how it was done before. But I thought, we talk about the institutional knowledge, and we want to reward people for that. but when they're redlined, they're not getting rewarded. And I don't know if this type of a policy would be of benefit, but that's why I had Tony kind of work something up so we can at least start a discussion.
Question. So with the 20, you say you use the 16 to 20 redlined after, does the chart just drop off, stop at that point? Or does, why are people, why are people redlined?
Sure.
Then does the chart, so to speak, the steps sort of stop then?
So when we created the step system, what our wage study did, and this is a process we had before too, but our salary scales, we have a minimum and a maximum range for each position.
Right.
And when we approved the step system, we kind of divided it out, and now you can predict if someone is hired at minimum and they get an increase every year, depending upon their job category. Assuming that there is never a market adjustment and all of those other things, someone would be redlined after, they'll reach that maximum, which is effectively redlining them after either 16 years or 20 years, depending upon their category. So some positions, it's 20 years because there's a larger spread in the salary range, so it takes them a little bit longer. Other positions, there's a smaller spread.
But couldn't the chart be
The
extended to 35 years or something, or, so that, the maximum and minimum and medium would go further into a person's employment?
The intention with the step system is we kept the steps to a certain amount. The red line is the maximum market value for a position. So we really can't exceed that without taking it through to council and with,
understand.
what we could do is we could squeeze in more steps in the same range, but then people would be getting very small increases. So this is a way of making sure people could still get an increase without making your annual increases be pennies.
Well, I stand for some type of longevity, something that kicks in, then after that, I just don't think that being redlined for is a good thing. So I would, if you're looking for some kind of sentiment from, at least for me, I think that we have to move towards some longevity beyond that 16, and however we want to do that, I'm not sure, but
Okay.
that's where I'm coming from.
One thing to keep in mind too, that is slightly off topic, but pertaining to your question, is that every 5 years, we are going to reevaluate the city's position in the market. So those market values for our salary ranges will likely be adjusted approximately every 5 years. So what we might find is that your current salary range continues to inch as the value of the dollar changes and things of that nature. This is not getting bogged down with that, but it just was pertinent to your question, so I wanted to make sure and provide that information.
So is this, am I clear on sort of how I perceive?
Yes.
And how I would stand for some type of longevity,
Okay.
so that those working here 35 years have, are not redlined, so to speak, and yet are, the city acknowledges the great benefit that they bring to the city of Wausau's workforce.
And of those 6 municipalities that you surveyed, do you know if they're using the longevity as a way to combat redlining in their own pay structures, or do they use it for a different purpose?
It didn't appear that they're using it to combat redlining. They remained on the rather traditional structure of after 5 years, you get an increase, or 10 years. And so no, it did not appear to be tied into their compensation structure in any greater manner.
Okay, and then this, and providing longevity pay, that's not going to subvert then the step system in any way, is it?
It
Or-
should not, no. This would be something that would come into play after the steps were all completed.
Okay.
If we choose, well, let me rephrase. If we choose to do a longevity system that comes into play only for redline people, then no, it wouldn't. If it happens within the step system, I still don't think it's accurate to say that it's subverting it, but they would be two systems that would be happening simultaneously.
Okay, I just don't want to see like a power, like that power struggle, between, one other, we set up these steps, and then all of a sudden now there's another factor that kicks in and throws the whole thing out of whack, so, okay. Do you have any idea on budget figures? I know there was some money here, but you said that the fiscal impact for 2019 was 49.2, but I think that's the current longevity plan for Metro Ride, correct?
No, it would be if we took the current Metro Ride longevity program and we applied it to all non-represented employees.
Okay.
So that's kind of a worst-case scenario at this point. That's by far the most expensive approach that we have currently mapped out. So we would be able to give you better fiscal numbers once we had a better idea of the structure we were looking at. But yeah, so that's kind of a worst-case scenario.
Okay, so
cost.
that's what the anticipated number would be. Okay, it was unclear if that's currently what Metro Ride was paying or not.
No, Metro Ride has significantly less employees, so that's if it were applied across the whole city with the
Okay.
current structure of anyone
Okay.
who has more than 5 years receiving something.
I kind of figured that would be the case, but
Yeah.
it was hard to.
I understand, yeah, I apologize.
I have a question about the chart that shows the current approved union structure, the 5, 10, 15, 20, 25-year chart, which does follow, I guess, the traditional increments I've seen my whole working life. Everything is in fives, 5 years, 10 years, 15. That's just typical.
There were some municipalities that did like a random 22 or 7.
Sure.
So I did find one that went off the 5s, but yes.
Yeah, I'm looking at, I'm always using that term creative, to perhaps be more effective, more competitive, rather than finding ourselves, constantly in the traditional mode, if you will, that, instead of 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, why couldn't it be 5, 8, 11, 14, 17, 20, 23? I mean, things like that, to sort of accelerate and to motivate in a more timely manner, rather than that 5 years, then another 5 years. Because when I look at the rate of increase, I know it's negotiated, but when I just think of my own personal, sense of what I think is a good deal, it doesn't seem like, after 5 years that's a very large increase. $15 a month, that's $180 a year after 5 years. And it's so incremental, not to be punny, that it just doesn't seem to be competitive or compelling as a tool to foster loyalty and people staying on board with us, particularly those higher tenured individuals. Through my working life, I've experienced some situations where not necessarily I, but others that I worked with looked at long periods of time before the expected raises came, but they were so non-amazing. It's like, oh, okay, whatever, and here's your pin to go with it. So I just don't see it, to me, as very compelling. I don't know if it is competitive in the marketplace. It might reflect what we see out there a lot. But I'm always looking for that something a bit more, amazing. It's exciting.
One of the things that we looked at, should the decision be made to do a program that goes into effect after an individual is redlined, to have an increased change every year. so that it was similar to the step system, but not equivalent. It's just something that is probably not fiscally feasible if we're doing it at the same time as the step increases. Something, a structure along that lines probably would work to subvert the step system, but if this is something that kicks into effect after the step system, it's something that could come into play. I was really just kind of getting the temperature of the committee if we're looking for something that's happening during someone's annual progress or something that comes into effect after that stops, because we have different structures that we can kind of consider for different situations, so.
So is the committee looking at doing, it doesn't have to be, but from 5 years on? Or are they more interested in doing more for the people that are redlined? I think that's kind of the question that we need, because we can't really hone down a system till we decide, are we going to, really look at the people that aren't getting any more raises from then on, or are we looking at anybody, from 5 years on, that we want to give them a little incentive? Because those are two different kind of systems, and I think to hone it, we need to kind of get you, what you are looking at as what your vision of longevity is.
Well, it's a good point, and, we can see that the redlining question is the most salient challenge that really kind of brings this discussion to the fore. And, Madam Chair, you used that term kind of like a little incentive, and for those people, I'm looking even for more than a little incentive. I'm looking for a meaningful one that reflects their value and our desire to keep them with us. So yeah, at the very least, if we're talking about people facing the red line scenario, that we deal with them in a way that kind of makes them go, oh, wow, thank you, rather than, oh, that's a nice little thing. Those are two different things, and I'm always thinking about, being competitive in the marketplace, protecting our most valued storages of information, in the body of these people. So that's what I'm looking for, I guess, is, and sure, fiscally, if we were able to carry it beyond the red line scenario and have this more of an institutionalized thing for everybody to have, incremental furthering based on tenure, great. But let's deal, of course, at the very least, with our most important challenge.
I guess one of the questions I have is, if we're looking to use this primarily for, to alleviate the redlining, is, if we look, I know now redlining is an issue, because we're just starting out in the step system, but if we progress 2, 3, 5 years down the road, are we going to continue to see more and more employees redlined? And so do we want to use this as a tool to kind of alleviate that? Or as we get more ingrained into the step system, will red lines be less of an issue?
I would say that where we are right now is the least number of red lines that we will have until the next market analysis. Before we did this job analysis, and I apologize, I used to know this when we were talking about the wage study all the time, but we had somewhere between 11 and 25 people who were redlined, and now we bumped that number down to, I don't think we have any people currently redlined. We have a couple who will be redlined coming up. We might have one person redlined. But, so our number right now of redlining is as low as it will be, and as people progress up the steps, people will start to hit those ceilings. And then the next time we do a market analysis, those ceilings will get readjusted, and then people will gradually work their way towards them again. So I do expect redlining to be something that continues to be a factor
As
for the city.
it creeps in as we move forward.
Yeah.
So, but then in 5 years, when we do a market analysis, and the wage rates change, and then people get off the red line, would they still get their longevity?
That would be something that we determine with the policy, and it would depend upon how the policy was written.
All right.
You know, if the longevity is based purely on a tenure, irregardless of your status in your pay system, then no, it probably wouldn't impact it. If it's something, a bonus, so to speak, that's being given to those individuals who have maxed out, then maybe you come off it and you work your way back to it. You know, that would be something that we would determine in the establishment of the policy.
But then we'd almost have to roll that red line bonus back into their base, wouldn't we, or
No.
not? Or is this, or am I overthinking this, or is this just something that's really hard to wrap your head around?
Yeah, this would be something that longevity is not base building. So it's, think of it in private industry, kind of like your unspecified bonus that you might earn every year at fiscal year end. In those circumstances, it's not guaranteed, but it's something that's not considered as part of your base salary, but just something that happens additionally and separate. So no, it wouldn't be built into their base values for the next market analysis.
So then maybe that kind of leads to the question, maybe this is something, if that's the case, we should think of longevity for, say, every employee that hits that 15-year plateau, because you said most redlining happens between years 16 and 20, as a way to kind of ease that pain in that 5-year window before the next market analysis, so that they can still continue on the ladder.
Yeah, it's hard to predict exactly when an employee would reach a red line. It depends upon their starting salary. The 16 to 20 years is if an employee starts at the minimum salary range and doesn't change jobs at all during their tenure with the city. So if you have someone who's here for 10 years and then they take a promotion, you could be here for 25 years and never be redlined. Or you could have someone who negotiates a very high starting salary and ends up hitting their maximum salary rather earlier. So it really can be a bit difficult to predict. You could have somebody who was just about to be redlined, they took a promotion and they dodge it for another, they never get redlined in their career. You know, unfortunately, that's hard to map out.
Okay. So would that maybe the red line's a good way to kind of stimulate people to think about, you know, looking at a promotion then, or to advance their own careers? Or is that, or are there some careers or some positions in the city where that's not really an issue? You know, I really like doing what I do and I want to do what I do till I retire.
I mean, sometimes it encourages people to go for a promotion. That's not really the intention. I mean, the intention is that the market establishes the value for certain job responsibilities. And, you know, but sometimes it has an unintended consequence of inspiring someone to advance. But that's not
Okay.
why we do it.
No, yeah. Okay.
So do you get a consensus, or is there a
No.
consensus? No consensus, Bill?
I mean, we could go, it seems like, to me, it seems like most people are worried about the people that are higher on the scale and that are redlining, but really, it shouldn't be redlining, it should be the years of service. So let's say, you know, we say 16 to 20, do we start it at 15 years? And then, you know, my thing is that, well, if the market rates increase, I don't know if you want to take longevity away. I don't know if that's, you know, that's my personal feeling. I think, you know, you never want to be perceived as taking something away. I don't think that's a good thing, but that's my own personal thought.
You know, I think of something like a 10-year anniversary as being, to me, that's big, you know, wow, 10 years here. It's been a long time, I've learned a lot of stuff, I've, you know, given a lot of myself to the organization, built up my value equity as an employee, but 10 years is not good enough maybe to make it into this discussion. That kind of bothers me. So I really am looking at more of a step-by-step, you know, visible growth pattern that rewards people for sticking here. So yeah, the fiscal, you know, question about how we can do that, you know, versus, oh, let's just take care of as I said earlier, the most salient problem. I can't speak to that, I'm not well enough versed in the fiscal thing. I'm just thinking if I were an employee, I'd sure like to see milestones in front of me that weren't, so far away that I can't even imagine them, really. Will I even have hair then, and such. So, when I looked at the negotiated scenario 5, 10, 15, I wasn't really, that thrilled, as I said, about the increments or even the size, but at least to me it shows, a relatively early acknowledgement and a continued acknowledgement through the tenure of an individual. I just want it to be as rewarding as we can afford it to be.
But I wonder if our goal, though, is to reward institutional knowledge and to retain these people, then we really can't use the longevity plan as a method of combating redlining, because the red line is always going to be a moving target based on, if there's a market analysis or not, in a time period, or if the employee takes a promotion, then they dodge the red line. So they would never get the benefit of the longevity in that
See,
case.
that's why I'm saying I don't want it for that. I want it for time. I don't want to put it on red line and then we take it away. That's personally, I don't like that. I don't want anybody having, oh, well, now I lose that. That will start a whole new scenario. So that's why, I think the red line speech was more, these people aren't getting any raises, and that was kind of the starting point of the whole longevity. It can be whatever anybody wants it to be, but I think, my thought was I would rather have it years served than, well, you have to be redlined, and if the new market analysis comes, your longevity pay goes away, because that doesn't make sense to me. You're still serving the same number of years, So I guess it sounds like people are interested in this. It's just the nitty-gritty of when do we start, and how often, do we start, here it goes every 5 years, or do we at 15 do it every year in smaller increments? It's really like an open canvas of whatever you're, perceived, or do you want to think about it and come back next month? It's whatever you perceive as what we can make it, or she can work up at least.
Can we have a motion here to
It's
extend?
actually not, it's just
no.
discussion, so we don't need to.
Okay,
vote
well
on
then,
this.
just to extend our interest to the Finance Committee.
Sure, well, what I can
to
do is
look into this.
for the next meeting, now that I know that the committee is looking for something that's based mostly on years of service and not tied to redlining, I
Yeah.
can put forward a couple of options for you for the next meeting with fiscal impacts attached, and then we'll move on it at that time, and it would either advance to the Finance Committee if we wanted a budget mod, or it would be addressed in the 2020 budget, so.
Okay, well, good.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
That we
All
got
right.
consensus on.
Yeah, that we did.
Well, you do, because it's different. It is a different. Okay, discussion and possible action on City of Wausau nepotism policy.
Okay, so as I'm sure we all remember, this item ended up coming back to committee from council with the request that department heads be surveyed and that outside private organizations also be surveyed. So we went ahead and completed both of those surveys. I tried to kind of sum it up for you. The department head survey, I spoke to department heads on a variety of topics. First, I asked them what their thoughts were on a direct reporting relationship versus indirect reporting relationship being prohibited. And I also asked department directors their stance on whether department heads should be prohibited from having covered family members anywhere in their department, and also if they had any thoughts on the current list of covered individuals. So to summarize, all department directors believe that a direct reporting relationship of covered individuals should be prohibited. 5 department directors, I did not survey myself, just for the record, I am not in the list. 5 department directors feel that indirect reporting relationships should also be prohibited. 3 thought this should be allowed. Their thoughts on the exact circumstances when it allowed varied from person to person. 6 department heads believed that department directors should be prohibited from having a covered relative anywhere in their department, while 2 believe that that could be allowed so long as that individual was not a direct report. There was some variation, as you can imagine, amongst the department directors, specifically on the discussion of covered individuals. 2 directors recommended the removal of temporary, occasional, or seasonal type employees. 2 department directors stated that marital relationships that begin at the workplace would have to be handled carefully, but that they should still be considered as covered individuals. 1 director recommended the removal of in-laws and cousins. 1 stated that they were torn on in-laws. And 5 recommended no changes. What was interesting is that 5 department directors that I spoke to started the conversation with somewhat of a horror story about nepotism gone wrong from their experience in their career. So that was interesting. And so what are your thoughts about nepotism? Everybody started out with a horror story. We also surveyed private organizations. And now this was difficult because the public does tend to hold municipalities and public institutions to higher standard in these areas. In fact, one department director said that he was like, I'm just flabbergasted that a family-owned company can take nepotism and turn it into a marketing campaign. But, so it is difficult to draw some correlations because we are a bit of a different beast. But we did reach out to 16 organizations, only 10 responded. 9 private companies prohibit direct reporting relationships. 6.5 companies prohibit indirect reporting relationships. That half value comes from a company that only prohibits next level supervision. That's actually similar to the draft that we presented. You can't have a relative as your supervisor or your supervisor's boss, immediate supervisor. 2 companies specifically prohibit department heads from employing a covered individual in their work area, but most were silent on this issue. Many companies neglect to define relative or family member, so they say you can't have a relative and it's up to you to guess what they mean by that. And half of the private companies surveyed consider individuals in a dating relationship as covered individuals. So we actually came across some pretty strict policies in the private world.
Excuse me, that last one, in a dating relationship.
Yes.
In what context? Because, I'm thinking sort of along the lines of what first brought this to our attention. If, I'm a supervisor and I have a sister whose boyfriend wants to work for me. Well, he's in a dating relationship with my sister. Is that affected by this, or is that like a loophole?
The dating relationship that's reflected in the summary is an employee, 2 employees who are dating each other,
Okay.
is what was reflected in the
So
survey.
you can see my problem here, because again, that boyfriend, as long as he remains a boyfriend, can come in and work for me and be a direct report to me. As soon as he marries my sister, he can't.
Yes, and a number of the private companies had similar policies that applied. But like I said, when we were looking at private organizations, a lot of their policies tended to be, like I said, in a lot of cases, they don't define relative. In some cases, they do. So for example, the YMCA defines immediate family member as mother, father, sister, brother, sister-in-law, brother-in-law, husband, wife, mother-in-law, father-in-law, child, grandchild, and grandparent. And other companies just had a policy that says your relative can't work for you. So, I mean, there was a large variety for the private organizations and the type of policies that existed.
And on the other hand, if I had a twin brother who was separated at birth from me, and I, and I never, ever knew this person for 50 years, and then they came into my life, they would not be able to work under me.
It would depend upon the definition of the policy.
And, well, the policy that states, a relative cannot be, a direct report. Whereas my best friend from elementary school, who I've known for 50 years, and call him my brother, and we do everything together, fishing, hunting, everything you can name, that person can be a direct report to me. No problem, because they're not related. And see where I'm going with this is that relationships, we keep using the word relationship in this summary, but relationships take on all kinds of forms. And they can lend themselves to favoritism or not. And I'll go back to what I said, I think, in our first meeting discussion about this. One of the definitions of nepotism in the dictionary is not just something related to favoring a relative. It's favoring anybody. Undue favoritism, in an advancement type situation, like in the workplace or whatnot. Nepotism can take the form of me favoring my very good friend and just, feeding their career and bringing them along. And that's quite all right. But if that person is related to me, it's not. I find this antiquated. It just goes against what I see, and I've referred to it before, the evolving definition of relationships in our society, traditional relationships, non-traditional relationships. The further I dig into this, the more I find opportunity for abuse, merely because I'm not related. I can get in under the radar. I'll let you finish.
Sorry.
Further,
He's not done.
further, you will find in our meetings, the minutes of the council meeting, that, and I don't want to put words in Alder Rasmussen's mouth, but she seemed to echo my concerns that things are changing. And our policy needs to be more creative and more up to date, and even be a leadership policy than a what's everybody else doing policy. Because you know what everybody else is doing just might not be all that effective or creative. It's more like a CYA type measure. I just don't see it as creative and forward-thinking, and it doesn't reflect the way society is changing. And it certainly seems to discourage things like, getting married. Because why get married if I can, have this sweet job? As soon as I get married, I'm in trouble. I have to find a new job. We have to look at it in terms of processes, in terms of, reporting processes. How do we deal with things of this nature? Because there's just too much opportunity for, as I said, under the radar kind of abuse. Or silly kind of enforcement that just makes certain people not eligible merely because of a bloodline question. So I'm still looking for that creative approach. We have a couple of department heads here tonight. I'd be happy to hear from either of them about their feelings along these lines. I know we got some summary here of things, but I'd be interested in horror stories and anecdotes and sort of knee-jerk reactions to the question itself. So I don't know if anybody wants to come up, but I still remain pretty much opposed to this approach.
All right, so Human Resources, again, to reiterate, was asked to survey department heads and private organizations. You have that information before you, so that completes my summary.
Well, as I think we are directed by the last city council to take a look, and indeed, that's exactly what we did. And I think the consensus that I'm hearing is that I think that most of the leadership feels that we should move in the direction that has been outlined to us. And I think we have to start somewhere. Sure, things are changing every day, but I think we have to at least put our stake in the ground somewhere so that at least we have some direction. Not only HR having some direction to lead the staff with regard to nepotism, as well as to know what the staff should be dealing with. I think we need to start. I think I voted for it last time. I will continue to support what was presented to us at the last HR meeting. I think that we just need to move on. And you're right, Tom, things just changing, but I think we need to be able to settle on at least some type of a standard. And in my view, that standard was presented to us with regard to how nepotism works in the city of Wausau. I do not want embarrassing situations to come forward. I think the city has been, the incident that I can remember was not well for the city, and I think that we have any obligation as the city council to look out for that and to make sure that we can take steps to prevent that as best we can into the future.
I think in the last council, when they kicked it back down here to committee, was that the sticking point mostly was with the hiring of in-laws and cousins, more so than their society is changing. And I'm still not, totally convinced that we need to, move forward in that route with accepting in-laws and cousins. But is that something we need to discuss in adjusting the policy to allow those cases? Because it seems like that's of where we have where we want to see changes to the policy. It's in those two regards.
I don't know. I mean, that's up to the committee, what they want, if they want to do any changes. You can amend anything you want. I'm just going to voice my opinion. I'm with Gary on this. I've been before. I've looked at this. I went over actually and listened to the entire council discussion about this again. And some things were said that were conflating of the issue. And I want to remind people, this is basically, we're talking the department heads. We have people in the police department that are married. We have people that are brothers. But they know too that the brothers that are doing it, they cannot supervise each other, and one or another probably will never be able to be deputy chief or chief if they both stay in that department. With the one we have now. And the nepotism policy we have currently is harsher than the one that's in front of you. So we do have that. It's really down to the top people cannot hire or cannot supervise because they're the ultimate supervisor. They cannot, those are the people's families that are involved. So I know that people will say, well, it's really shrinking. There was one comment of it shrinking the employment pool. Well, we have 8 department heads? And it's their immediate families, 9, their immediate families. I don't know. Another thing that was saying, well, when we checked on all of the legal opinions, well, it may be legal if that's what you only ask. That was not what we asked. I'm going to push back. We never said, well, can you tell me if this is legal? And then, well, we're ready to go. It wasn't. We requested, and the red letters or the red words that you see in that change policy were from Mary Hubacher. I think that's her name. She, I know Gary and Tom know that she sat here with Ann before we had an HR director, and she helped with rewriting some of the handbook, and she was working with negotiations at that time before the HR person was filled. So it's not somebody that we haven't known or somebody that did it. This was considered best practice. That's all she said. This is in her employment as an employment attorney, this is best practice, and that's where the wording came from. The one thing that they did bring up in council was one council member said they were worried about indirect versus direct supervision. We put, I think it's both, right? Indirect.
The revision would prohibit direct supervision and one level of indirect supervision, so your boss's immediate boss, as well as a department head. So it does cover both direct and indirect. But if the department is deep enough, you could have someone who's a supervisor who's neither the department director nor the supervisor's supervisor. So it would open up a little bit more possibilities.
So it seems like the bigger the department, there's more wiggle room to move people around. You know, I mean, when you have more silos to go, like the police department or the fire department maybe. I don't know, I mean, that's my personal opinion on it, but I just wanted to go over that there were some things that seemed to be, that wasn't the way we were looking at, if this is, please tell us if this is legal, and we can say we checked with an attorney. I don't know if if somebody wants to amend it and say, we want to take off certain people, they can do that. I mean, it's open to whatever you want.
So are you looking for another motion then, or or what are we looking for?
We'll need a motion to move it on, or we'll need to, or discuss more, whatever people want.
Well, I think the survey that we were asked to do presented the issues back to us, and I think the consensus was in line with the program that was presented. So I'll make the motion that we again send, after the research, to send that back to City Council as presented.
And I'll second that motion.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Neil's opposed. Sorry.
Future agenda items.
Future agenda items. Social media policy is one.
The social media, I'm off. The social media policy for elected officials has been drafted, but I apologize, I didn't get that drafted before Ann went out of town, so she has got that on her list of things to review for me for the next meeting.
Longevity is coming back.
Longevity will come back. We have some police department anniversary issues that we're, hopefully we'll have ready for the next meeting as well. And I believe we've got some items from DPW that may appear. So it'll be a packed agenda. Does anyone have anything else they want to make sure we cover?
Okay. All right. Then I'll take a motion to dismiss. Thank you, Gary. Second? Thank you, Dawn. All in favor? Aye. We adjourn.